They say wealth can buy comfort, but it can't buy loyalty, love, or peace of mind. In the glimmering world of high society, where fortunes shift with every signed contract and every discreet affair, betrayal lurks behind even the widest smiles. One man, once known for his generosity and business acumen, allowed greed and lust to shatter his perfect family life. Today, he's a living testament to how far a person can fall when pride and infidelity eclipse devotion and honor. Buckle up for a tale of hidden agendas, dashed dreams, and raw heartbreak. This is the story of Millionaire ignored his pregnant wife for Mistress. But when she left, he regretted and begged her not to leave. Christopher "Chris" Jameson was a man whose very presence commanded attention. At 39, he exuded a confidence that few could rival. Tall, impeccably dressed in tailored suits, and known for his charismatic smile, he had built a financial empire centered on real estate technology investments and media production. Wherever he went, the cameras followed, and every business publication clamored for an interview. Married to the radiant Lisa Morales Jameson, their love story had seemed the stuff of fairy tales. They met at Yale, both scholarship students determined to carve out their path in the world. Lisa was studying journalism, while Chris dabbled in economics. Their intellects collided on the dais of a student debate, culminating in a friendship that rapidly blossomed into something deeper. Long before Chris soared into the ranks of millionaires, Lisa was there typing up his class notes when he was overwhelmed and slipping him an extra protein bar when he studied late at night. Their relationship was built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and an unshakable belief that they were destined for greatness, but most of all destined for each other. Early in their marriage, times were tough. Chris's first business venture, an import-export startup, fizzled out in its second year. With minimal savings and no plan B, they wound up living in a cramped studio apartment in Brooklyn, stretching every dollar. But Lisa never complained. She saw brilliance in Chris and believed wholeheartedly that their struggles were but stepping stones to a better future. Her unwavering faith paid off. Chris eventually caught his big break. He spearheaded an investment in a tech company that skyrocketed, showering him with more money than he'd ever dreamed possible. Suddenly, life turned into lavish trips, designer clothes, and a towering home in the Hamptons. The once hungry college dreamers became the talk of New York's high society. Lisa, now a well-regarded journalist working on her first book, was the poised and gracious hostess of Chris's countless soirees. The couple was unstoppable, or so it seemed. Yet behind the golden veneer lay cracks. Chris's unrelenting quest for success overshadowed the nurturing bond that had once been the cornerstone of their marriage. Lisa, now pregnant with their first child, yearned for the days when their love was enough, and they needed nothing more than each other's presence. Little did she know those simpler times were about to fade even further away, as temptation began to whisper in Chris's ear, in the form of a woman named Bianca de Rossi. Bianca de Rossi was a socialite with an air of mystery. Born into old money wealth in Italy, she had relocated to New York to chase the electric pulse of business deals, five-star restaurants, and exclusive galas. Rumor had it that she was fierce and charming, a woman who possessed both good looks and an uncanny ability to read people's vulnerabilities. She was the kind of person who could walk into a crowded room and emerge with the most valuable connection wrapped around her finger. Lisa's first encounter with Bianca happened at a lavish charity gala for the St. Andrew's Children's Foundation. Chris was a featured donor that evening, lauded for his generous contributions. As Lisa stood by her husband, proudly rubbing her slightly swollen belly, Bianca's entrance turned more than a few heads. Draped in an elegant black gown, her emerald earrings sparkling under the chandelier, she made a beeline for Chris, wearing a knowing smile that sent chills down Lisa's spine. The introduction was cordial enough. Bianca praised Chris for his philanthropy and cast a fleeting glance at Lisa's pregnant belly. She complimented Lisa's grace, called her glowing, and said she'd love to meet again. But behind the woman's polite veneer, Lisa sensed a peculiar tension. Something about Bianca's gaze, flicking to Chris then, to Lisa, then back again, felt off. Over the next few weeks, Bianca appeared at an alarming number of events that Chris attended. Sometimes, Lisa was too fatigued to go out her pregnancy, wearing her down. Chris, of course, insisted that these events were crucial for networking. He would come home later than usual, exhausted, but oddly energized by the new opportunities Bianca seemed to bring his way. As time passed, Lisa began hearing Bianca's name in casual conversation far too often. It came up at business breakfasts, at high society cocktail parties, in phone calls that ended abruptly when Lisa walked into the room. Whenever Lisa asked Chris about Bianca, he waved off her concerns, attributing it all to business ventures. He would kiss Lisa's forehead gently, telling her to rest and not stress over trifles. But Lisa knew better. Her maternal instincts, sharpened by her pregnancy, sensed a storm on the horizon. The shimmer in Chris's eyes whenever he mentioned Bianca wasn't just about business. It was the dangerous spark of desire. And soon that spark would ignite a blaze that threatened to burn down everything Lisa held dear. A normally mild-tempered woman, Lisa found herself torn between trusting the man she had always believed in and acknowledging the red flags accumulating around her. Though she was hesitant to admit it, her well-honed journalist's instincts picked up incongruities in Chris's behavior. The first real indicator of trouble came one quiet Sunday morning. Lisa was preparing scrambled eggs in their expansive sunlit kitchen. She heard Chris's phone vibrate incessantly on the marble countertop. Typically, if he was in another room, she might glance at the screen to see if it was an important call. This time, her eyes widened when she glimpsed Bianca de Rossi flashing. Beside her name was a string of heart emojis. Heart emojis. Lisa's hand gripped the edge of the counter as she swallowed back the wave of anxiety. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe Bianca was just being playful. Maybe it was some inside joke about a new charity. But deep down, she suspected a far less innocent reason. At breakfast, Lisa attempted to broach the subject. "You know, I saw your phone lighting up this morning. Is everything okay with Bianca's?" Project Chris stiffened. He placed his fork down in a motion, so controlled it almost seemed rehearsed. "Yes. She was just texting about a business proposal in Italy. She wants me to invest in a few properties there." Lisa nodded slowly, searching his face for any sign of betrayal. But Chris's expression was guarded, like a marble statue, revealing nothing. Feeling an ache in her chest, Lisa let the topic drop. Over the following days, Chris's absences multiplied. He had early morning meetings that bled into late-night engagements. Lisa grew tired not just physically from the pregnancy, but emotionally from carrying the weight of dread. She began confiding in her close friend, Sophie Parker, a journalist colleague who had known them both since college. "This feels so surreal," Lisa admitted during a coffee break. "I never expected to question his loyalty. Chris was always the anchor, the one who made me feel safe." Sophie, known for her straightforward demeanor, took Lisa's hand. "You need to confront him directly. Let him know you're aware something's off. Don't stay silent." Lisa promised herself she would, but fear held her tongue. She was terrified of the truth. Beneath the surface, their once perfect marriage was already fracturing. The woman who had stood by Chris through thick and thin now stood at the edge of an uncharted precipice, unsure whether she would freefall or find firmer ground. Lisa's suspicions finally crystallized one fateful evening. Chris had told her he had an urgent business meeting in Midtown. She decided to do something she had never considered before, follow him. It felt wrong, but her growing anxiety dictated she take drastic measures. Slipping into a black coat, she grabbed her car keys and quietly tailed his sleek Mercedes from a distance. Just as Chris had told her, he pulled up to an upscale hotel in Midtown. Yet what happened next confirmed Lisa's worst fears. She watched from across the street as Bianca stepped out of a taxi and greeted Chris with a tight, intimate hug that was more affectionate than professional. He guided her inside his hand, lingering around her waist in a way that told Lisa everything she needed to know. In that moment, something inside Lisa fractured. She felt a surge of emotions, heartbreak, betrayal, and a burning anger she never knew herself capable of. Lisa headed back home, tears streaming down her cheeks, her mind racing. She couldn't decide whether to confront him in a fit of rage or gather more evidence to confront him calmly. Torn between anger and sorrow, she sat in their expansive living room, the city lights flickering outside, waiting for Chris to come home. It was past midnight when he walked in, reeking of aftershave that wasn't his. Lisa stood up from the sofa, arms crossed over her swollen belly, tears staining her eyes. "Did you have a productive meeting?" she asked, her voice trembling with forced composure. Chris feigned surprise. Yes, it went on longer than expected. "Just business talk." The final shred of Lisa's restraint snapped. "Don't lie to me. I saw you with Bianca, and I saw how you touched her." A look of shock flashed across Chris's face, followed by a frown laced with guilt and irritation. "Lisa, please, it's not what it looks like. Stop insulting my intelligence," Lisa spat. She broke down, tears falling freely. "I'm pregnant with your child, and you're out there with another woman. What is wrong with you?" Struggling between defensiveness and remorse. Chris stood paralyzed. A pregnant silence loomed between them. For the first time since she'd met him, Lisa saw genuine fear in Chris's eyes. Fear that perhaps he was on the brink of losing the one thing he always claimed to hold dear, his family. But in his mind, Bianca still loomed large, a temptation too potent to resist. After that explosive confrontation, an uneasy truce set in. Chris moved into the guest bedroom under the pretense of not disturbing Lisa's rest. She in turn avoided prying too deeply, opting instead to focus on her upcoming doctor's appointments. Still, the tension in their luxurious penthouse was palpable, the once warm corridors now echoing with cold silence. Lisa tried desperately to recenter her life around her pregnancy. She reached out to her trusted OB/GYN doctor, Rebecca Holmes, who had been a friend since her first days in New York. In a discreet conversation, Lisa confided her emotional distress. The doctor insisted she prioritize her mental health for the baby's sake. Stress could lead to complications. Lisa nodded, swallowing tears, determined to protect her unborn child from the turmoil swirling around her. Meanwhile, Chris's life seemed to spiral in a different direction. He spent more and more time in his office or out on business trips. Whenever Lisa glimpsed him at home, it was in rushed interactions filled with tension. She overheard hushed phone calls from the guest bedroom, fragments of laughter, and whispered endearments that were certainly not meant for her ears. Despite the pain, Lisa clung to the hope that Chris might revert to the man she'd known. She sent him texts about upcoming doctor's appointments, pictures of nursery designs, gentle reminders of the child they'd once eagerly anticipated. But Chris's responses were perfunctory, peppered with disclaimers about urgent deals or last-minute investor luncheons. One weekend, Lisa tried to break the ice by inviting him to a private ultrasound appointment. He promised to attend, but never showed. When she texted to ask where he was, the only reply she received was a curt, "Sorry. Busy. Will call." That was the moment Lisa realized the chasm was growing wider by the day. The heartbreak etched across her face was impossible to hide even from herself. At night, she'd lie awake, feeling the baby move, tears staining her pillow. She needed a plan, one that ensured her and the baby's future, especially if Chris was no longer willing to be the partner and father he had once vowed to be. Yet in this painful new reality, Lisa wasn't alone. She had allies who refused to watch her suffer in silence. Friends like Sophie and Doctor, Holmes, and even Chris's former business mentor, Jake Winston, began to sense the looming breakdown. Their support would soon become a lifeline she would cling to when all else seemed lost. From her glossy penthouse on the Upper East Side, Bianca de Rossi reveled in the affections lavished upon her by Chris Jameson. If the high society rumors were to be believed, she was on the verge of signing her name to lucrative deals in Europe, deals that Chris was bankrolling. Chris, it seemed, was utterly bewitched by Bianca's assertive confidence, relentless charm, and most importantly, her affirmation that he was a visionary genius whose brilliance was wasted on domestic trivialities. In Bianca, Chris found what he perceived as a younger, more adventurous version of Lisa. Not that Lisa wasn't intelligent or beautiful, she was both. But Bianca showered him with flattery, always telling him that he deserved more excitement, more opulence, and more thrill than he was getting. For a man whose entire identity was built on external validation, Bianca's words were a siren song, too tempting to resist. Encouraged by Chris's fascination, Bianca began appearing in public more frequently by his side. They were seen together at exclusive charity auctions, at private clubs, and sometimes in broad daylight at romantic brunch spots that typically catered to the elite crowd. The paparazzi, always hungry for scandal, started snapping photos. Rumors swirled through New York's social circles. One by one, acquaintances began to notice that Lisa was glaringly absent from Chris's side. Lisa heard the whispers, and each new rumor stung like a fresh wound. Yet she wasn't entirely powerless. Quietly, she collected evidence, financial documents, property deeds that Chris had hastily signed over bank transfers that pointed toward Bianca's never-ending list of business ventures. Lisa kept them all tucked away in a secure folder, her instincts as a journalist fueling her need for the truth. Eventually, even Chris's closest friends grew concerned. Jake Winston, the man who had guided Chris from a bankrupt startup founder to a multi-millionaire, decided he could no longer watch Chris sabotage his own life. He scheduled a meeting in his office, summoning both Chris and Bianca for a friendly discussion. Jake had always admired Lisa's resilience and was appalled by Chris's blatant disregard for her. Bianca arrived first, wearing a silk blouse and a condescending smile. Chris followed shortly, edgy and defensive. Jake cut through the pleasantries swiftly. "Chris, you are risking everything. Your marriage, your reputation, your upcoming business expansions. Are you sure you're making the right choices?" Bianca arched an eyebrow, defiant. "What Chris does with his life is no one's business but his own," she quipped. But Jake turned stern eyes on her. "You have no idea the damage you're causing," Jake said bluntly. "And Chris, you better wake up before it's too late." Jake Winston's warning had echoed in Chris's mind for days, but instead of heeding it, he hardened his resolve. The more friends and mentors tried to steer him back to his senses, the more Chris felt the need to justify his actions, even to himself. He crafted a dangerous narrative, one where Lisa had become distant, too caught up in her pregnancy and her writing to understand his needs. In his mind, Bianca wasn't the problem. She was the solution, the spark that reignited his passion and drive. He told himself it was unfair for anyone to judge what they didn't understand, that Bianca got him in a way Lisa no longer did. She was bold, exciting, electric. She didn't ask for balance or boundaries, she fed his ego, and in return he showered her with gifts, investments, and the illusion of permanence. But illusions don't last forever. That evening, Lisa sat in the back of a taxi, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched an envelope. Inside were printed photos and bank records, proof she had carefully collected over the past weeks. The decision to follow Chris one final time had not come easy, but it had become necessary. She had to see it for herself. She needed clarity, not just for her own sanity, but for the child growing inside her. When the taxi slowed in front of Il Fiorentino, a posh Italian restaurant nestled discreetly in Midtown Manhattan, Lisa's heart pounded. Through the fogged glass, she could already see them, Chris and Bianca, seated by the window, laughing over wine, as if the world outside didn't exist. She stepped out into the cold night air, pulled her coat tighter around her belly, and made her way inside. The hostess barely had time to greet her before the room fell into a hush. Patrons glanced up from their plates forks, hovering mid-air as Lisa made her way to the table, eyes burning tears, clinging to her lashes, hands trembling but sure. Chris saw her before she spoke. His body stiffened. Bianca set down her wine glass and tilted her head, amused more than surprised. Lisa stood tall, refusing to falter. "Chris," she said, voice loud enough for half the restaurant to hear. "I've begged you to come home. I've waited. I've given you every chance to be honest. But here you are, again." Bianca smirked, adjusting the strap of her designer dress. "I'm sure this isn't the place for Lisa. Cut her off." "Be quiet." Chris stood, reaching out as if to calm her. "Lisa, please. We can talk about this later. Let's not do this here." "No," she snapped. "We do this now, or we don't do it at all." With trembling hands, she placed the envelope on the table between them. Photos spilled out Chris and Bianca at a charity brunch walking hand in hand near the Met, and one damning shot, Chris entering Bianca's penthouse late at night. Paperclipped to the photos were printouts of wire transfers, each stamped with Bianca's name and an offshore account. Bianca's smile faltered. Chris paled. Lisa's voice trembled, but never broke. "You thought I wasn't paying attention. But I was. Every time you lied, every time you disappeared, I saw through it. I just kept hoping you'd stop on your own." Chris's hands clenched at his sides. "Lisa, I didn't mean." "Don't you dare finish that sentence," she warned. "You made your choices. You humiliated me. You abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. And you thought I'd just stand by while you played house with her." Bianca rolled her eyes. "This is getting dramatic." Lisa's eyes flared. "Take your hand off my husband." The restaurant fell completely silent. Bianca withdrew her fingers from Chris's arm, but not without a smug glance, as if daring Lisa to do more. Chris looked like a man unraveling. "Lisa, please. You're upset. Let's step outside." "And I'm not upset," Lisa replied coldly. "I'm done." She took a step back and leveled her voice so there was no mistaking her meaning. "I'm leaving Chris. I'm taking our baby with me. And I promise you this, you will regret throwing away your family for some fantasy." Her words struck like a gavel, a final sentence. And with that, Lisa turned and walked out, her head held high even as her tears fell. Chris remained frozen shame blooming in his chest. Bianca stared at the photos still scattered across the linen tablecloth, no longer smiling. Around them, patrons slowly resumed their meals, though many still cast glances, whispering in shock. In one swift public confrontation, everything Chris had tried to keep hidden was exposed, and for the first time, he wasn't sure how to pick up the pieces. Lisa's confrontation at the restaurant sent shock waves through Chris's life. The following week, Lisa moved out of their penthouse. She packed her necessities along with the evidence she had gathered and took refuge at a close friend's townhouse near Brooklyn Heights. Sophie Parker opened her door wide to her distraught friend, offering a sanctuary and a sympathetic ear. For the first time in years, Chris returned home to an empty space, a chilling silence filling every corner of their luxurious abode. He found Lisa's closet, half empty, the infant onesies and baby crib gone from the once hopeful nursery. In the bathroom, her floral-scented toiletries were missing. It was as if Lisa had erased her presence overnight, leaving only echoes of what their life had been. The reality of Lisa's absence hit him with surprising force. He wandered listlessly from room to room, caught between guilt and resentment. Part of him believed Lisa was overreacting. He rationalized that their marriage had stagnated, and that Bianca only brought out a side of him he thought he'd lost, adventurous, driven, alive. But another part of him was haunted by the memory of Lisa's tear-streaked face at the restaurant and the silent heartbreak in her eyes. Bianca, sensing a shift in Chris's demeanor, attempted to fan the flames of Chris's anger. "Don't let her guilt trip you," she would say. "She's trying to control you because she's jealous of our success. Focus on the deals we have in progress. You're about to expand your empire globally, Chris." Though her words had once enticed him, Chris felt a hollow pang in his chest. The future once seemed so bright with Lisa by his side. Now an emptiness lingered, no matter how many high-stakes deals he inked, or how many exotic dinners he attended with Bianca. At night, he'd lie in bed, remembering the early days when Lisa would slip under the covers beside him, softly whispering about their dreams for the future. Lisa, meanwhile, was far from idle. She sought legal counsel, discussing her options regarding alimony, child support, and custody arrangements. She also updated her will and lined up a potential investor for a new writing project. Jake Winston, who respected Lisa as much as he pitied Chris's foolishness, offered a helping hand. "Whatever you need, Lisa," he promised. "I'm here for you." Despite her determination to remain strong, Lisa felt the sting of heartbreak every time she glanced at her swelling belly. The man she had loved so dearly, who had once been her anchor, was now the source of her deepest pain. 2 weeks had passed since Lisa walked out of Chris's life, and with her departure came a storm he never anticipated, swift, merciless, and all-consuming. At first, Chris tried to maintain a facade of control. He told himself it was only temporary, that Lisa would cool off and come back once she saw things clearly. But reality hit harder than he could brace for. The silence in the penthouse was deafening. Every room once filled with Lisa's quiet laughter, or the faint hum of lullabies from the nursery, now echoed with emptiness. But Chris had little time to dwell on his loneliness. His empire built on ambition speed, and a healthy dose of charisma was beginning to crumble. The first tremor arrived in the form of an email from Charles Davenport, head of a billion-dollar family investment fund and one of Chris's biggest backers. The message was clinical, devoid of warmth. Davenport's firm was withdrawing from a major tech partnership that had been months in the making. The reason concerns regarding personal conduct and its potential impact on brand alignment. Chris stared at the screen, frozen. Davenport had been a long-time ally, someone who had once toasted to Chris's business foresight at a gala. Now that bridge was burned without ceremony or explanation, beyond the unspoken truth, his scandal was tainting everything he touched. The ripple effect was immediate. Another real estate venture, an ambitious waterfront development, was suddenly halted. City inspectors arrived unannounced and cited irregularities in permits and unauthorized modifications. The news leaked within days. Headlines buzzed Jameson Empire faces scrutiny amid personal scandal. From power broker to problem child, has Chris Jameson lost control? Investors panicked. Stockholders demanded transparency. His company's value dropped. Board members who once praised his disruptive energy now whispered about his instability behind closed doors. And while the business crumbled, Bianca only pushed harder. "You need to move your assets offshore," she insisted over dinner one night, swirling her wine as if the chaos didn't involve her. "Milan and Paris are calling. You can still win if you focus." Chris was too tired to argue. He authorized a massive wire transfer to fund one of Bianca's luxury developments in Italy, money that should have been earmarked for damage control at home. One transfer became 2, then 3. It was all bleeding too fast. His liquidity shrank. Creditors called. Even his assistants began resigning. Then came the press. Paparazzi followed him like shadows, hounding him on his way to meetings waiting outside his penthouse. He was branded as the Wall Street Casanova and the millionaire who lost his morals. Photos of him with Bianca, some candid, some far too intimate, were splashed across tabloids. No matter how much he denied it, the public believed Lisa's silence more than Chris's spin. One afternoon, Chris returned to his office and found a thick envelope on his desk, hand-delivered, official-looking. Inside was a letter from Lisa's attorney. Legal separation, custody filing, financial disclosures. The papers spelled it out plainly. Lisa wasn't bluffing. She intended to legally separate, claim custody of their child, and demand support. Chris sat at his desk for hours, the documents trembling in his hands. All his power, his prestige, his wealth, none of it could stop the unraveling. His marriage, his family, his image, his fortune, they were all slipping like a sand through his fingers. But the most painful part, he still didn't know how to feel. Anger, shame, regret, or just fear of losing the last thread of control. He told himself he could fix it, that with enough capital, enough smart moves, he'd bounce back. He'd silence the press, stabilize his company, and win Lisa back with grand gestures. But deep down, Chris Jameson, once the king of deals and charm, was unraveling. And in the dead silence of his penthouse, surrounded by shadows of what once was, he began to suspect that the price of betrayal wasn't just high. It was everything. The mood in Bianca's penthouse was tense. Chris arrived unannounced, his face, grim eyes, shadowed by weariness. In the living room, adorned with avant-garde sculptures and dripping with opulence, he found Bianca lounging in a red silk robe, sipping champagne as if she had not a care in the world. She arched a perfectly shaped eyebrow at Chris's abrupt entrance. "You look stressed," she commented, feigning innocence. "Is something the matter with your precious business?" Chris glared at her, not in the mood for idle banter. "You know exactly what's happening. I've lost investors. Projects are on hold. The press is swarming me like vultures. And to top it all off, Lisa has officially filed for separation." Bianca shrugged, swirling her champagne. "You knew this might happen. I told you the key is to push forward. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelette." "Are you even hearing yourself?" Chris snapped, his frustration boiling over. "You have no idea what I'm going through. My child, my wife, she's gone. And I feel like I'm losing my grip on everything." Bianca regarded him with cool detachment. "Don't you dare blame me for your issues, Chris. I didn't force you to cheat. I simply gave you an option when you were bored with your life. You made a choice. You're a big boy, remember?" Her words stung, if only because of their brutal truth. Indeed, Chris had made his own bed. Yet a sense of desperation gnawed at him. He needed Bianca to show some semblance of concern or empathy, to at least acknowledge his turmoil. Instead, he was met with cold calculations and a single-minded focus on financial gain. "I need you to lay low for a while," Chris pleaded, almost choking on the words. "Let me handle these crises without more negative publicity. Maybe if we just—" Bianca held up a manicured finger, cutting him off. "I won't fade into the background, so you can salvage your marriage or your reputation. The deals I'm making can't wait. If you want your stake in them, wire the money. Otherwise, I'll find another investor." Chris felt a knot tighten in his chest. For a moment, he questioned if this was the same woman who had once made him feel invincible. He realized too late that Bianca's love language revolved around power and money, and if he was no longer able to provide those in abundance, she would not hesitate to move on, leaving him with nothing but regret. While Chris was wading deeper into professional and personal catastrophe, Lisa found herself embracing a cautious new chapter. Safely ensconced in Sophie Parker's townhouse, she turned her pain into motivation for a brighter future for her and her unborn child. With Sophie's help and Jake Winston's backing, Lisa began drafting a proposal for a documentary-style exposé on corporate greed and personal ethics, a story close to her own situation. Her meeting with Jake was held in a discreet cafe downtown. He offered financial support for her documentary, along with connections to established media networks. "You have a voice that needs to be heard," Jake encouraged. "You've always had a gift for storytelling, and now you have a powerful one to tell." Lisa nodded, heart pounding. She understood the weight of her choice. Revealing her personal life on a public stage would strip away her privacy. But she also saw an opportunity to stand up for herself and for countless others trapped in toxic relationships where greed and ambition overshadow moral obligations. Meanwhile, Lisa's doctor, Rebecca Holmes, monitored her closely. Stress levels had taken a toll, but the baby's heartbeat remained strong. "You must prioritize your health and emotional well-being," Dr. Holmes gently reminded her during a checkup. "Find what brings you peace." Peace for Lisa began with letting go of her illusions about Chris. Despite the pain, she forced herself to accept that the man she had once loved might never return to the values they once shared. At nights, she would hold her belly, whispering to her unborn child about the new life she planned for them, one built on honesty and stability rather than broken promises. Support came from unexpected places too. Isabella Monroe, a well-connected friend from her journalism circles, offered to help Lisa find a comfortable long-term rental and introduced her to a litigator known for protecting women's rights in high-profile divorces. Slowly but surely, Lisa's safety net grew. She began to see that her future didn't have to be tethered to Chris's spiraling downfall. For the first time in months, Lisa felt a sense of empowerment. She had a plan, both for her professional endeavors and for her personal life. No longer was she a helpless spectator in the drama Chris had orchestrated. She was taking the reins resolute in her mission to protect her unborn child and carve out a stable, loving home. As the weeks trudged on, Chris's empire, once so formidable, began to buckle under the weight of scandal and poor decision-making. Multiple venture partners severed ties, citing a lack of confidence in his leadership. News outlets ran stories insinuating corruption in Chris's businesses, though nothing was formally proven. The damage, however, was done. His name was tarnished, and the air of invincibility he'd once projected had all but disappeared. During one catastrophic board meeting, Chris found himself cornered by furious shareholders and worried executives. They demanded transparency about finances, especially concerning the millions funneled into Bianca's ventures. The tension in the room was palpable, with some members going so far as to suggest Chris step down to salvage what remained of the company's reputation. But pride would not allow him to relinquish control. With a trembling voice, he tried to reassure them that everything was under control and that the returns from Europe would more than compensate. Yet even as he spoke, Chris knew he was lying. Bianca had become increasingly elusive. On their last call, she claimed she needed additional time to finalize deals, hinting at a possible delay in any profits. Her tone had grown chilly, her patience obviously dwindling with each of Chris's pleas for reassurance. Meanwhile, Lisa's legal team advanced with negotiations demanding a hefty settlement that included child support, medical coverage, and a fair share of Chris's assets. With mounting financial obligations to keep Bianca afloat, Chris found himself facing the very real prospect of liquidity issues. He began to panic, staying awake late into the night, crunching numbers, plotting strategies, and desperately trying to plug the holes in a rapidly sinking ship. As if orchestrated by fate or karma, his personal life eroded in parallel with his business. The media hammered him relentlessly. Late-night talk show hosts made him the butt of jokes, dubbing him the careless Casanova of Wall Street. Old friends, once eager to bask in his success, now distanced themselves, wary of the public backlash. In the swirling maelstrom of his misfortunes, Chris had nowhere to hide from the repercussions of the betrayal that started it all. On one particularly bleak evening, he scrolled through old photographs of him and Lisa. Her bright eyes and loving smile from happier days contrasted starkly with the images the tabloids now splashed across their front pages. Only then did Chris grasp the gravity of what he had lost. He had sacrificed a life built on genuine love for illusions spun by vanity and lust. For weeks, Bianca had grown increasingly distant. The warmth that once simmered in her voice turned into vague replies and abrupt calls. The lavish dinners, flirtatious texts, and whispered promises had all faded into polite detachment. But Chris refused to see the signs. He convinced himself she was just stressed about the failing deals. After all, he had poured millions into her ventures across Europe. Surely that counted for something. Surely she wouldn't leave him. But Bianca's world didn't run on loyalty. It ran on momentum, power, wealth, and the promise of more. And Chris, once a man of infinite resources and social prestige, now bore the stink of scandal and failure. The message came in the early evening. Just 4 words on a screen. "We need to talk." Chris's stomach twisted. He didn't bother calling. He grabbed his keys and headed straight to her penthouse. The elevator doors opened onto her floor, and what greeted him wasn't warmth, it was quiet packing. Suitcases were open on the bed. Designer gowns, luxury handbags, and glimmering heels were strewn across the room with surgical precision. Bianca moved with practiced efficiency, folding garments into her Louis Vuitton luggage, as if she were merely heading off for a weekend spa retreat. Chris stood frozen at the doorway. What is this?" She didn't look up. "I'm leaving," she said simply, her voice steady and calm. For how long, he asked, though part of him feared the answer. Bianca paused, zipped one suitcase, and finally looked at him. Indefinitely. "I'm going to Monaco. I've got new connections there. It's time for a fresh start." His heart sank. "Monaco. You're abandoning everything. What about the projects? The plans, me?" She gave a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Chris, those projects are hanging by a thread, and let's not kid ourselves, whatever this was, has run its course." Chris's voice rose raw with disbelief. "You're walking away after everything I gave you, everything I sacrificed. My marriage, my name, my company for you." Bianca arched an eyebrow. "I never asked you to do that. You made your choices. You threw your life into a volcano and assumed I'd build a throne from the ashes." He stepped forward, desperation slipping into his tone. "I loved you, Bianca." "No," she said flatly. "You loved the idea of me. The escape. The thrill. But when the thrill wore off and reality hit, you expected me to be your anchor." She closed her final suitcase. "I'm not that woman, Chris. I'm not your rescue. I'm not your redemption." There was a moment of stillness between them. Chris's chest heaved with rage and sorrow. "But I'm broke! I'm ruined! My company's in pieces. Lisa's gone. And now you're leaving too." Bianca softened for the briefest second, Then it vanished. Exactly. And I don't plan to be the last rat clinging to a sinking ship. Her words sliced like razors. Chris staggered back a step. I gave you everything I had. She slung her handbag over one shoulder and headed toward the door. Then you should have saved something for yourself. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. She passed him, perfume trailing behind her like a fading memory. At the door she turned once more, just long enough to deliver the final blow. Good luck, Chris. Really, I hope you find something left to rebuild with. But don't expect me to wait around and watch. Then with a quiet click, the door shut behind her. Chris was left standing alone in a luxury apartment that no longer belonged to love or success, but to failure echoes and regret. The woman he had burned his world down for had just walked out with nothing more than a few designer bags and not a shred of guilt. And in that moment, Chris Jameson saw the truth with piercing clarity. Bianca de Rossi had never been a partner. She had been a mirror reflecting all his worst instincts, all his unchecked ego, all his blindness. And now even that mirror had shattered. Bianca's departure didn't just leave a void, it left a gaping wound, one that Chris could no longer ignore. The woman he had gambled everything for had walked away without hesitation, and now the pieces of his broken life lay scattered around him, a ruined reputation, a crumbling business empire, and a family he had betrayed. For days, Chris drifted like a man, underwater, breathless, directionless. The penthouse, once filled with lavish parties and polished charm, now reeked of absence. Lisa's laughter, once the soul of their home, had long faded. The nursery was empty. The silence was no longer peaceful. It was punishment. He sat in the dark one night, scrolling through old photos on his phone. Lisa at Yale, smiling with a pen tucked behind her ear. Lisa in their first shoebox apartment, laughing as she burned toast. Lisa holding up a positive pregnancy test, tears in her eyes. That Lisa, the one who believed in him, who waited through failure, who never once asked for luxury, had been real. And he had shattered her. The realization broke something in Chris. He could no longer run from the truth. He didn't just miss Lisa. He needed her. Not for comfort or convenience or redemption, but because she was the only real thing left in his life. The only person who had loved him, not for what he had, but for who he was. He began reaching out first with texts, then calls, then long emails filled with apologies. Most were met with silence. Others were answered by a stern reply from Lisa's lawyer. It was clear if he wanted to speak to her, it would have to be on her terms. Finally, through Jake Winston, he learned that Lisa had rented a small apartment on the Upper West Side. Not the townhouse she had first taken refuge in, but a quiet, modest home she'd chosen for its calm. She was due in a few weeks. The thought of missing his child's birth sent panic through his bones. That evening, dressed not in his usual power suit, but in jeans and a simple shirt, deliberately plain, Chris walked the long blocks to her address. He carried a bouquet of lavender roses, her favorite since college. They weren't perfect. A few petals had browned at the edges, but they were real. Like his regret. His fingers trembled as he pressed the buzzer. Static crackled. Hello, Lisa's voice was cautious, even cold. It's me. Chris. Please, just let me talk to you. Silence, then a soft click. The door opened. He stepped inside slowly, the scent of clean linen and vanilla meeting him. Lisa stood in the hallway, belly full and radiant despite the tiredness in her eyes. Her arms crossed protectively, as if forming a barrier between them. You have 2 minutes, she said quietly. Say what you need to say." Chris swallowed the lump in his throat. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice breaking. "I know those words don't begin to cover it. But I mean them. I ruined everything. I betrayed your trust. I lost sight of what mattered, and I let vanity lust destroy the only life I ever truly wanted." Lisa said nothing. Her silence was deafening, but she didn't walk away. That alone was something. He continued, stepping no closer. "I kept trying to fix things by throwing money at problems. I thought if I could maintain success, I wouldn't have to face how badly I'd failed as a husband. But losing you, losing us, it broke me in ways I didn't think possible." Lisa blinked slowly, eyes unreadable. "So now you come crawling back, after she's gone, after your empire starts to fall. Is this about guilt or desperation?" Chris hesitated. Both, he admitted. But also something more. Clarity. "I see things now I refused to face before. I've started therapy. I've stepped back from the company. I'm trying to be better, not to win you back, but to be someone our child can be proud of." Tears welled in Lisa's eyes, but she held them back with steel will. "Do you even know what you did to me, Chris? You weren't just unfaithful. You abandoned me when I needed you most. When I was scared, when I was carrying your child, when I was alone, you were with her." "I know," he whispered. "And I'll regret that for the rest of my life." He took a breath. "I'm not asking for a miracle. I know I can't undo the past. But if you'll let me even just a little, I want to earn back your trust. I want to be there for our baby. Not just with money, with presents, with love." Lisa looked at him, then really looked. She saw a man bruised and battered, not by the world, but by his own choices. Not the slick millionaire from the tabloids, but the college boy she once believed in, buried under years of ego and ambition. She stepped aside slightly. "Leave the flowers on the table." He obeyed. As he turned to go, her voice stopped him. "This doesn't mean I've forgiven you, Chris." He nodded. "I know, but..." She added softer, "It means I'm willing to see if you're serious." Chris exhaled, feeling the faintest glimmer of something he hadn't felt in months: hope. Chris knew that if he had any hope of reconciling with Lisa even partially, he needed to show her genuine change, not empty promises. He voluntarily stepped back from his CEO position, relinquishing control of his major projects to a trusted interim leader. This move calmed some investors and indicated he was taking responsibility for the chaos he'd caused. Meanwhile, he attended therapy sessions, seeking to understand why he'd thrown away a loving marriage for fleeting excitement. Through soul-searching and professional guidance, Chris unearthed buried insecurities, the insatiable desire for validation that success had once provided, and the hollowness that no amount of money could fill. Each therapy session left him drained yet oddly hopeful, as though each revelation was a stepping stone toward becoming a man worthy of Lisa's respect again. Lisa too underwent her own healing process. With her documentary concept gaining traction, she poured her experiences into a powerful narrative about betrayal and resilience. Gradually, she found it in her heart to allow Chris small gestures like joining her at a prenatal appointment or sharing occasional updates about her health. Though the path between them remained fragile, they were no longer entirely estranged. When the day of Lisa's delivery came, Chris rushed to the hospital, nerves jangling. Lisa was in labor for over 10 hours, her screams echoing through the sterile corridors. Chris stood by her side, offering ice chips and holding her hand despite her earlier refusals. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy, whom they named Lucas, an homage to their combined Latin and English heritage. Tears streamed down Chris's face as he cradled his son for the first time. The magnitude of fatherhood overwhelmed him, eclipsing all thoughts of money or business deals. In that instant, he understood that nothing he had lost mattered as much as what he held in his arms. And Lisa, exhausted but triumphant, watched him. Though scars still lingered, a seed of compassion took root in her heart. Over the next few months, Chris worked tirelessly at rebuilding trust. He was respectful of Lisa's space, never pressing her beyond what she could tolerate. He paid child support willingly, even before the court's final decree. He cut all ties with Bianca, refused to entertain rumors, and focused on stabilizing his company with transparent ethical practices. In time, Lisa allowed Chris more involvement in Lucas's life. They weren't miraculously back to the fairy tale days. They were different people, shaped by heartbreak and hard lessons. But they were united by the love for their son, and the faint possibility that with humility and perseverance, a new bond might be forged. Whether or not they'd ever rekindle their marriage remained uncertain, but for now they had found a flicker of hope in the midst of devastation. Sometimes the greatest lessons come with the highest price. Chris Jameson lost almost everything, his reputation, millions of dollars, and the trust of the woman who stood by him through thick and thin. Yet from the ashes of betrayal emerged a father, determined to do right by his son, and a woman who refused to be broken by heartbreak. This story, though steeped in drama, is a testament to how deeply our choices can shape our destinies. Perhaps redemption is possible, but it demands genuine remorse, consistent effort, and time. If you found this real-life drama compelling, make sure to hit that like button, share it with friends who crave twists and turns, and subscribe to our channel so you'll never miss another gripping tale. Your support helps us continue, bringing you stories that remind us in life, karma always keeps the receipts.